Yay, guests are here.
Yay!
So happy.
So happy. Thank you, Misha. Thank you, Mike, for visiting with us on our live. We hope to see you guys more often for sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Jerome, you're missing your alphabet soup. We all have alphabet soup. Jerome doesn't have his MCLC.
I'll add mine as soon as I get everything on the back end set up.
Misha keeps us on our toes with our alphabet soup.
Not that it's important, except that, here we are at Coaching Institute and we're all certified. So, I mean, it's kind of a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. We are.
Official like a whistle. That's what that means. We're official.
Yes.
Who wants to share our title for today?
Ooh, it's a good one. It's
Emotions
all about
101.
Emotions 101, empathy. But what's the rest of it? I can't see it.
Building your coaching superpower.
There you go. I guess I got it.
Okay.
Pew, 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 pew.
So I actually had a question before we even go into what it is. I'm curious what and we don't have to answer this question, but it just came up for me before we went live. When you heard the word empathy at one point in time, how did you actually define it for yourself before you looked it up?
Oh, that's a great question, Misha, because until maybe college and maybe more so post-college in my adult life, I always was of the understanding that empathy meant in order to feel it or relate, you have to have gone through it. So I used to think empathy is the actual experience of it before. So that was my understanding. So it was so funny because in my adult life in college, it used to be confused when people would use empathy so much. It's like, it's a lie. You can't be empathetic if you haven't gone through it or you're experiencing it. So I'm glad you asked that because I was going to share that during the live. But yeah, that's how I thought of it before I actually learned what empathy truly is.
I had somebody in a class that was arguing with me that was the actual fact that you're saying, Mike, and so I can understand the confusion. I so can understand that confusion. What was yours, Misha? Because this is your baby.
That's right. That's why I should go last.
Okay. Fair.
Right.
I can say, honestly, I just thought it was to feel sorry for somebody at one point. That's all I thought it was initially. Like, I guess in my adolescence.
Like pity them?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. To pity them.
Yeah, similar. I definitely confused it with sympathy. I thought it was the same thing essentially, but I also thought it was like all about feeling, like really feeling. I didn't know that there was a distinction in like, the types of empathy. So if I couldn't, if something bad happened and I didn't have a physical sensation in my body, I assumed that I couldn't feel empathy, which may or may not be true, Misha. We're going to find out, I guess.
Are we? Just to everybody watching, we're not giving you all the answers. That wouldn't be right.
Very true.
What about you, Lisa?
Gosh, I don't remember really because I've been doing this side of the fence for so long. I would imagine prior to this side of the fence, I would imagine that I thought it was more about compassion, and I imagine that it probably had a more sympathetic flavor to it. But I honestly don't remember.
Yeah, and that's my honest answer as well. I honestly don't remember, except I think it was somewhere in between both the empathy, sympathy, like not having a clue that there was a difference, and what Mike said around, I can't have empathy for you if I actually didn't truly, really take your shoes off your feet and walk in that experience myself. And so, so thank you everybody for, bringing your answers in. So, but you mentioned also like sympathy. So what are people's differences? How do you define the difference between empathy and sympathy?
My sympathy definition was more of what Jerome said. Again, formative years, I understand sympathy of just totally, because there's some nuance to sympathy as well. But I thought it was just feeling sorry, like absolutely feeling sorry for someone, and I thought it was just heavily and overly emotional
Yeah.
connection
Yeah.
type thing. So that was my understanding of sympathy. Like, oh, like the furthest end of the spectrum in terms of the emotional side of connection and feeling sorry for someone.
Yeah, I was same. I thought it was just like I had to be devastated with the person in order to feel sympathy. So, yeah.
Yeah, when those two terms were presented to me, I think I kind of probably just put them together and just kind of interchanged them. So really no distinction, I would say.
I think for me, I can only think of a time when I was going to a funeral, somebody that my grandfather had lost, and felt bad for them. Right? That time stands out to me. My computer's going crazy. That time stands out to me as a good moment where I felt sympathetic or sympathy in that moment. It was really weird. It was the first time I'd actually gone to one, and my grandma had just passed away, and I hadn't been able to make it back for hers, so there was that too. But
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that what I knew about sympathy, which again, I don't even know at a younger age if I knew there was empathy, a word called empathy and an experience that was associated with that. Um, so sympathy for me was that pity, that sorrow. Um, and but sometimes there was like, in fact, I'm wondering if maybe for me, sympathy was like pity call and empathy was sorrow, you know? But what I've learned, like for me with empathy today, is that ability to just look at someone, imagine how they might, and Lisa, if you mute while you're not talking, then we won't hear your notifications going crazy. Just FYI.
now it's my mouse connecting and disconnecting, connecting and disconnecting.
Oh,
Oh,
goodness.
shoot. So when I was able to really identify that sometimes empathy I don't have to even say anything to exhibit empathy. Just looking at someone and in my own heart and mind, imagining what they might be going through, but not taking on those feelings. And then and I've shared with this when I've taught classes, like just putting my hand on my heart when someone shares, that's empathy. I'm not getting overwhelmed by it. It's not changing my life, but I'm feeling with the other person what, I'm allowing the other person to feel that I'm here understanding them. So for me, understanding and empathy are synonymous today, as Lisa on this side of the fence. The deeper connection, right? My vision, as you all know, in my own business is to help 1 million people feel seen, heard, valued, and understood. But that for me, that's the empathy. I want to see you. I want to hear you. I want to value you. I want to understand you. And students are always asking in the mentoring program, because I'm the mentor coach here, obviously, for those of you listening. And they're always asking, well, I don't know how to put in the empathy. What does that look like? So let's talk about that. Is that what we're talking about today? I don't know. Are we talking about that?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
The coaching superpower that is empathy.
But before we get into it, let's talk about what it is and what it is not. So we kind of tiptoed on it in describing what we thought sympathy was and and where we thought empathy was back in the day, right? So what is it?
What Misha just said, I think, is the understanding. So, from what I've learned, there's two types of empathy. There's cognitive empathy, which is being able to understand, put yourself in someone's shoes, understand from that perspective, from their story, that they could think, feel, act that way. Maybe not act, but think, feel. I'm just kidding. And then there's emotional, or what is called, I think, affective. Is that right? Empathy. And that is where you're actually like deeply feeling, you're feeling emotional, you're experiencing something like vibrationally in your body, energetically in your body, rather than just having a cognitive understanding. So that's what I have gathered from our research. Does that check off?
Yeah.
Does that track? Okay.
I think, because there's cognitive empathy, there's emotional empathy, and there's also compassionate empathy.
Oh, okay.
But I'll come
What's
back.
compassionate? Okay.
Yeah.
Going back to it.
Yeah, and I think too, the idea, the opposite, what Lisa said is what is not is, again, to be confused, sort of like what Jerome and I shared almost, because when Jerome said, I was like, yeah, I guess it was kind of that too. The younger I was, lumping them together is that it's synonymous to sympathy. And Misha, when you were talking, it just made me think of just even class material, but it's like a simplistic way for me to understand it on the other side now at this stage of my life is easy for me to understand and conceptualize it. Is empathy is the absence of the enmeshment, where and this is getting further, but I can understand you, but I don't have to necessarily have taking your shoes off and walked in them.
Right.
So I think that's the biggest part too that gets confusing, is like, is this fine line between is it sympathy, and so what is not is this idea of now I have to take on everything, and it makes me somehow, some people may feel this way, that empathy makes you weaker. Which is, again, one of those things where that's absolutely not the case, but that's the thought that some people take on.
Yeah. I think that's an important distinction, that it is an actual strength, why we've called it the superpower, right? In this experience, because we get to hear people in a whole different frame of reference when we come from that, as opposed to when we've spoken about, oh, I'm empathic, right? That they think that they need to, whoever feels like they're empathic, which I think I am, and I think all of us are here, but that doesn't mean we need to wear what somebody else is feeling. We don't need to take on their emotions. We don't need to really be in it. It's kind of be with it, but not in it concept.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth, Lisa. I was going to say it's interesting that you brought that up, Mike. I think that some people believe that empathy requires you've got to be crying across from somebody if they tell you something that they might be physically crying about. That doesn't necessarily have to happen when you're displaying empathy for somebody. It comes in many different forms. I think it's something that gets a little bit confusing when we're talking about the definition of what empathy is.
Yeah. And then just to come in, because everybody got so intrigued, I loved that. I was like, ooh, I want to know. Compassion, empathy is when you really feel what somebody's going through and you're motivated to help them. But we have to be careful with compassion and empathy, because if you've not done enough work on yourself, that can develop into codependency, in which case you end up jeopardizing your own well-being to help other people. And so having that compassion and empathy, you have to be really grounded in your own boundaries and your own abilities and the way you receive and give. So I wanted to add that in.
And sometimes it's just really hard to determine what that is until you've done that work, for sure.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Misha. It's like that right there. I'm glad you said the precaution of that. You got to be careful with that. And that's the deeper where you have to know yourself in terms of that, because that could lead to, I feel like, the fine line where people automatically lump it to where the fine line of now being attached, taking it on yourself, where now you may be helping someone else, but how does it set you back in terms of that that deep feeling and lead to more emotional or deeper issues? So when you said that, it just made me think of that point too, of like you say, it's definitely one of those things where the superpower can be a weakness if not careful, if we haven't done the inner work, so to speak. So yeah, thank you for saying that.
Several of us just had a conversation not too long ago on LinkedIn around empathy as a superpower, not a liability. But it can become a liability if you're not careful, right? And I like to kind of frame this idea of empathy is not pity. Empathy is not an excuse. Empathy is a powerful tool for connection. But that doesn't mean we're saying, oh yeah, it's okay if you're showing up late for work. Like it's really important to that empathy and boundaries are synonymous and can be synonymous. Like you can have empathy and have boundaries. But what you were just saying, Mike, it reminded me of like when we're teaching these classes and we're doing mentoring and we're helping people, coaches become better coaches so they can serve, right? If they move into a place of codependency with their empathy, then they're going to be handing out resources left and right. They're going to be telling people how to do it instead of letting them learn how to do it themselves, right? They're not going to help create the resilience their clients need because their empathy has turned, their compassionate empathy has turned into codependency.
And it sounds like control. As you're describing it, it's them controlling the outcome in the situation.
Yes, not attached to the outcome. Oh, yeah, they are.
And honestly, we all want well for our clients. There's not one of us among us that would go, oh, I want my client to suffer and go through. No, none of us want that. But at the same time, it's not our work to, it's not our work, it's their work. Just like our work's our work. And, you know, that defined space and ownership needs to be theirs. What we are is something different. Even in our empathy, in listening and hearing them, we provide that space where oftentimes, you know, in the outside world versus coaching world is not, you know, we've got all that fixers, we've got all the advice givers, we've got all the really not being empathetic, but much more controlling to an outcome kind of givers.
And from what I was reading, the desire to control is coming from a fear response rather than the desire to connect is coming from a love response. Would you agree with that, Misha?
Oh my gosh, totally. Yeah, absolutely. Love and or care. Some people don't like the word love in that sense.
Okay.
But we're either caring about someone, we're loving someone.
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, oh, she disappeared again. my whole world just
That dang mouse.
It's magic.
yeah, I think that people can confuse these terms of care and love with I got to take care of you, I got to dive in and do everything for you. I mean, I had my own micromanaging, hypervigilant mother days, you know. And so I really appreciate having learned in my later life as a mentor, as a coach, as a teacher, I don't have to do everything for everybody, right? But when I care about them, I have to ask the question, how does my care now manifest for them? And really, it's about asking those thought-provoking questions that develop their own resilience, their own journey, because their journey is different than my journey.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that's huge.
That's great.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jen. Yeah.
No, you go. You go, Mike.
No, that just, I was going to be short. Misha, it just made me really think about kind of what we talk about in 102, that attachment versus connection, even when Jen said it, like, and it's a big difference and in terms of what it does as well, because when Jen talked about that fear response versus the care or love or that compassionate connection, it just makes me think of that very thought right there. You know, to be attached is one thing. And what you said, Misha, just lit another little boop, thought bubble of like, what does it do? What is the message that my care for you and my concern, what is the response to that? And not only how am I going to respond to it, but what is the message that it portrays to you? And it kind of gets to the point of, am I seeing you as weak, that you can't control what happens, that you no longer have that autonomy or agency? You know, well, I feel so bad, which again takes us back to that other one, the sympathy. Oh my God, I gotta help you because I care and you just gotta get over this. So now I'm gonna fall back into the, hey, I have a solution, this little shiny solution for you here, Misha. So that's what it made me think about. I'm sorry, Jen, go ahead.
Oh, you're good.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I was just gonna say I appreciate that small language addition of love to substituting care in there, because that for me is big, love does not always land for me, and care, it's just, that's a game changer. So that's super helpful. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And then I know we haven't heard from Jerome and Lisa. I want to just plug this in real quickly. Something that came to my mind was this idea that when my kids were younger and I was in that control phase because I cared about them. I like what Jen said around the fear, because with the tiniest thing, you give your kid the role of washing the dishes, and then you start telling them to do it this way or that way because you care. You want them to learn how to do it right. But the fear is that they're not going to do it right, and we're all going to die from some kind of germ infested thing because they didn't clean or whatever. So I do believe that there's a difference between the fear and the control and the connection piece. And so one of the things I remember my bonus daughter saying to me was, "It feels like you don't trust me." And she was probably right. At the time, I didn't know it, but I know that several times my kids or students or whatever have said that to me in the past. I'm realizing, ooh, here I am holding on again, controlling, right? And that is not empathy. That can go into sympathy, and that can go into mistrust, and that can go into the control and the fear. And so taking that pause to decide, do I need to say something right now? Or do I need to ask something right now? They're
Yes.
so different, say versus act, right?
Yes. And so that to me is like the stimulus, and then you have your choice point of your response if you catch it. Many times we don't, but once we learn that it's there, we catch it, and then we can either go either way. So we can go care, love, connection, or fear, control. And then the next step in the connection one is exactly what you just said, which is asking, curiosity versus telling, judgment. At least that's how I'm envisioning it.
Yeah, there's a really good chart that Jen shared that is coming to mind. You just recently shared it in the
Like,
I'm
I
gonna
love
drop
it.
it in the chat for
Yeah.
people to grab too. It's attributed to, so
It is attributed. Okay, good.
yeah, it's got her her name on there and her website. It was really well done.
Yeah.
So I know that when we're teaching the classes, the first time I was learning the curriculum, Mike said something that has stuck with me, and I think all of us, and maybe somebody said it before Mike, but I attribute it to Mike, which is curiosity cures the coach. And I'm pretty sure it's Mike's. Okay, good. And what's interesting is I was giving a talk the other day, and I talk about judgment and bias, and I looked at everybody and actually randomly, I like, hey, everybody stand up. I want you to make a pledge. And they're like, okay. I'm like, well, you don't have to make it if you don't want to, but they all did, which is curiosity, not condemnation. And so that goes to that judgment piece, but it also connects with this empathy piece. Like, Mike, you put it in the chat here for us on this channel to see, like, if we could trust as coaches, if we could trust our clients to really know that they're there for a reason, that they know why they're there. They found us. They're not broken, right? We tell our students that all the time. But we, as an institute, Lisa, the owner, Jerome and Tag, Jen, Mike, me, do all these different people. We have 14 beautiful people in our company. We work really hard to trust the people that come to our school, right? And we also are not always in the coaching role. So as a coach, that trust has to go large, wide, and far. But as a mentor, as an administrator, as an owner, sometimes we have to control some things, but we can still always walk forward with curiosity, not condemnation, right?
Absolutely. There's you're using the word condemnation, and it brings up something that we were experiencing before we went live here. Somebody wrote something, and it kind of set us all in a big discussion around this. Are we always supposed to be empathetic when somebody else is really condemning, let's just say me? If someone's condemning me, am I still really supposed to have empathy for them? How do I do that? I'm not even talking about being in the overwhelmed state or in the place of stress. This is just somebody else, that really is out to get you versus the imagined out to get you. I wonder, this is not coaching concept in that we're not going to visit that probably in coaching, but in the out there world where we all live, what do we do there?
You know, that's, well, I'll be quiet for a second. Somebody else want to?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
We're stumped. We need help.
Tell.
All right. So this is really hard. And there are going to be a lot of people that agree with me and a lot of people who don't. When there's somebody in your sphere that it feels like they're out to get you, that's their stuff.
Which we
And
all
so-
agree. We
Yeah.
came to that. But
Yeah.
and while I could get, like when Jen was talking, I can get empathetic, cognitively empathetic, and emotionally empathetic with Jen with what she was saying, but I could not get it. You know, I am aware of where they were probably coming from. I understand the psychology of it, but the living of it, right?
Right. And this is where I said it very at the beginning, empathy and boundaries can be synonymous. And so I had an experience several years ago where I was doing a lot of hard work for somebody I worked for, and I really cared about them and their program. And I was telling everybody how wonderful it was. And that person accused me of trying to steal the clients. And I'm like, no, I had an opportunity, so I went for it. They reached out to me. I didn't see anything in the paperwork that said I wasn't allowed to. But I was not trying to. In fact, I was still praising their program with these people. And what the reason I talk about it not being personal, I know we all understand that, but what I decided for myself was I had to choose empathy for me first. Because if you don't choose empathy for yourself first, you actually can't have empathy for others. And then the other component of this, which is not the title of our talk today, everybody, but I'm going to say it anyways, you can't have empathy if you don't have emotional intelligence. And so you don't work on your own emotional intelligence. What am I feeling when this person is having feelings? And how do I handle myself when this person is having their feelings that may or may not feel personal? And so if I don't step back and identify my feelings and have then empathy for my feelings, I can't even touch with a 10-foot tall, 3-mile pole what's going on for the other person. I have to create the boundaries to support myself first before I can ever come back to the discussion of what are you upset with? How can I serve?
It always seems to come back to emotional intelligence.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, in that particular instance, it's real quick, Mike. In that particular instance, I think, you guys were kind of discussing back and forth. I didn't really hop in because I chose peace for myself. I was just like, I saw this, I'm moving on. And even though it irked me in the moment, it didn't really rile me up too much. Like, it was just, I think it goes back to what Misha was saying. I think my experience having dealt with stuff like that previously adds to my emotional intelligence to the point where I was just like, okay.
To know, Jerome, to know that you have an option to choose peace is really high emotional intelligence. Some people don't even realize they have the option to choose peace first.
I don't want to skip Mike.
Oh no, I just want to say that, Misha, I think too that point is so big in terms of empathy can be synonymous with boundaries, meaning that your empathy should have boundaries, if I'm understanding that correctly, right, Misha? Because I know sometimes when people hear that, they'll think, wait, is empathy the same thing as boundaries? Or like, it's always, but what you said, that right there is amazing, because all of that, you wrapped it up, Misha, in a gift box and put a bow on top. When you say it has components to it, right? So now for me to have that empathy in a situation where it's not easy to do so, yes, the emotional intelligence is part of it. Yes, the boundaries is part of it as well. And something that we say, it's not me, not mine. This is not my aggression. This is not my belief. This is not my jacked up viewpoint of whatever. And so it's like, you know what? That's you. Bless you. I see it. I have compassion for your lack of whatever that may be. And I don't have to, you know what I mean? So it made me think about that. It's all of these things. And so empathy comes with a responsibility as well. It's a responsibility when you're talking about connecting. And beyond that, when you're talking about the compassionate connection of another human being, it comes with a responsibility of, hey, I have to have, back to what you said earlier too, Misha, I have to have done the work enough and have the maturity to understand me first before I can do that.
And I think if we're talking adding boundaries, which it's wise to do that in this discussion, it's not about boundaries necessarily to point at others. It's our boundaries that support who we are, what works for us, and what doesn't work for us. So the idea when we say boundaries, that's what we're talking about. A lot of people think boundaries when they're really rules that we have for others, that's different than what our boundaries are. So to be really clear on that, especially as a coach, to have that understanding is helpful as we are practicing empathy.
At least that's really critical. And I want to come back to something, because obviously our audience is our students. Our audience are people who may be our students. Our audience are people who've gone through the credentialing. When I'm working with my students in the mentoring process to get their credential, and they share an audio with me, I can hear whether they're grounded or not. I can hear if they took time to get present before getting on that call, right? And the more I do it, the better I get at it. And they're like, oh my God, are you psychic or what? I'm like, no, it's in your voice. It's in your statements. It's in your comments. It's in the way you've asked your questions, right? So empathy for ourselves means pausing, slowing down, taking a break before, even if it's 1 minute meditation before getting into a client session, so we can be fully available and present. That in its own is a definition of empathy for our clients. Having empathy for ourselves creates empathy for our clients.
I would say that again, because I think that's really important for those that are in that coaching, in this coaching realm, whatever fashion it is. I think this is a key ingredient. Go ahead, say it again.
Which part? How about you say again? Y'all, you heard.
No, I'm doing.
Okay, Jen, do it. You got
okay,
this.
So what I heard was that when you're in a session, it's important for you to have empathy for your own experience of however you're witnessing and experiencing what's happening in the session first before anything else. So for example, if someone in my session,
let me pause for a quick second, because it's really before the session ever starts.
Oh, okay.
Before the session ever starts. I mean, we just got information recently that one of our family members is having some challenges, and I had to go into a coaching session. If I had gone straight from there into my coaching session with all the emotions I was feeling and fear, I would have given all of that to my client's space. So before we ever go into the session, even if it's just 30 seconds or 16 seconds, do the box breath, right? For those of you that don't know it, look it up, or I'll teach you later. But if you take 16 seconds to close down some of those tabs or slow down some of those emotions, as you go into the session, you're already exhibiting empathy for your client because you've exhibited for yourself.
God, and I love the visual of closing out the tabs.
Yeah, it's really
because
helpful.
That makes so much sense to me.
To close out my tabs.
Gosh, that's wow. Okay, so mentally and emotionally, you're closing out your tabs.
Yeah, and not dismissing them, not getting rid of them, but just saying, in order for me to best serve my next client, where's the empathy for me? So that when I show up, I have empathy for them. Just in our presence alone is empathy. right? But I love where you were going with that, Jen. So I'd love to hear, like, within the session, yes, we can witness because we are more centered, right? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, for me, sometimes it's not often, but every now and then there could be a piece of language that has a bit of an activation for me. And I just kind of have this moment where I go, I see that activated you. Okay. It's okay. And so I have empathy for myself in that moment in order to stay fully present for the client, because I recognize, like, that wasn't about me. This is not about me. I need to stay with them. And in order to do that, to dismiss that to me is more like, it's not going to help the session. Acknowledging it and moving, forward seems to be the best. And then I kind of come back at the end of the session and check in with myself and just, make sure that I feel seen, heard, validated to myself, that there was something in that session that activated me. And what do I want to do about it going forward? Is there something that needs to be explored, or, and I didn't know to do that in the beginning. In the beginning, sometimes I would get activated and I would just kind of go, "Oh, what's wrong with you? You're a coach now. You shouldn't be like that."
I used to write it. I was a hand noter, not an abundance of notes, but I would have my notepad ready. And if something activated me, I like that word. I would just jot it down, like on the margin. Anything I put in the margin on the paper was my stuff. Everything else was theirs. But if I had to go back and reimagine or do the work or whatever that was, that's what I would do. And then I would lean into whoever I felt like it was necessary as part of my team.
Right.
I would check in with them if I needed to, and go from that route if I needed more work there. So yeah.
And actually, Misha, from mentoring with you, one of the big things you taught me was, for me to self-witness an activation, sometimes it's merely hand on heart, deep breath. That's it. That's enough for my body to feel like safe and regulated in the space, like, very quickly.
Nice.
Yeah.
And to go back to connect the dots to what you shared, Jen, what Misha talked about in the beginning, and Lisa's point, because I felt that in that moment too, Lisa, like, hey, this is a note to bring, this is a takeaway. Coaches, literally, to bring it all together is your presence will show up when you fully prepared yourself to be in that space. And so this idea of how I show up in the session, it takes that. Jen, you said something like, initially I thought, but there was some prep, and the more you learn. So it's now, okay, before I bring everything into this session with me, what have I done before to show up? So now I have a clean slate. They're creating the artwork. It's a clean, empty canvas. They're creating this picture, and I have to have prepared and let go of everything I brought till we get to that place of what I call the superpower too, is that presence. And Misha, you said that in that statement. So to Lisa's point, that's important, everybody. You have to make sure that you're grounded, whatever that means to you, centered, whatever that means for you, to be in the space where you can connect. Because if you don't have those tabs closed, it's going to be impossible, because now when you say something, it's not landing the same, because I'm thinking about, oh my God, I didn't take care of this thing that I had coming up. I didn't meet this deadline, and I'm trying to hear someone else's issues, and I can't, because it's not getting through that wall that I have, that I brought in here, even subconsciously.
As I was listening. Oh.
Well, I wanted to ask you a question, Lisa, because, my mentoring students do bring this question in quite a bit. Like, it says I'm supposed to show empathy for my clients. So, an evaluator is listening, and if empathy for, is just being present and really showing up and being connected, like, it doesn't always have to be words, but at the same time, I'm just curious, I know you can't give away evaluator secrets, but I'm just curious, like, are evaluators looking for certain phrases and words, or is that really it? The presence and being centered for the client?
Centered and present for the client. They're not really looking for key phrases. They're looking for key connection, key ways that the coach is hearing and listening and embodying in the sense of what their client is saying.
Which can
not
be
wearing what their client is saying, but
right.
Yeah.
which can be an example of asking a thought-provoking question, an open-ended question, following what the client says. That can exude or embody empathy alone, right?
Yeah. So sometimes what they do,
students, but they get very like, I'm supposed to say something. I know you don't have to say anything necessarily, right?
sometimes they think they got to give them the cheerleader response. Oh, that's a good job. Oh, that's amazing. And that's the piece that you don't want to do, because that is about you and how you perceive what they're saying is.
Right.
And the direction to go in that moment is to ask them how they're feeling. If you feel like you want to praise them, stop. I call it the stop, drop, and roll. Don't open your mouth until you breathe. Right? Just take a nice deep breath. Box breath is perfect. Whatever, breathe, and then go, how are you feeling in this moment? Because what you have picked up as the coach is an honorable thing that you've picked up. But to put it in your words in that moment, that's their job. So you really want to ask into it versus give them the words in that space.
I want to quickly go back to something Jerome said, and maybe Jerome, you can come in on this a little bit because we haven't heard from you very much, but I saw you put your title and your initials. I'm so excited for you.
Well, mine got sidetracked a little bit there.
No, I love it. You said earlier, bottom line is I chose to protect my peace. And I don't know if you knew or if you would have labeled it as having empathy for yourself.
I definitely would not have labeled. I would have just. I think I see it as an efficiency tactic. It's just, if I'm not at peace, I can't really get anything done. So it's something that I prioritize for that reason, or at least that's how I saw it. So, yeah.
And how are you feeling or seeing it now? Any differently? And you don't have to, because I'm not up to the outcome.
I do agree that I definitely see it as empathy combined with boundaries. I see it definitely was something that I was aware as a boundary of mine that I had put up. But I understand the aspect of implementing this boundary into my understanding of what empathy is as we speak about what empathy is on this live stream. So I wouldn't necessarily classify it just yet as empathy to myself, but I do acknowledge it. I do acknowledge that it can be.
Yeah, it was. I was going to say a word nice, but it's not nice. But it was timely. There's the word I'm looking for. It was timely for that to happen, so we could build a real live moment that we all struggled with in that space of providing empathy. Because even though we probably have decent emotional intelligence, we have decent boundaries, it's still a challenge, even though we've done that work, to come from on that certain kind of topic, to get into that empathy, compassion side of things, and to remember that we have to, and I think it's a have it for ourselves first, I think is a great reminder to go there first.
Well, in 101 and 102, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. I know, Lisa, you haven't taught a class in a while, but Mike's been the one, I think, more recently teaching. Don't we share with our clients, like, you can't take your clients anywhere you're not willing to go?
Usually.
Yeah, we mentioned that. We mentioned that throughout, right? We mentioned that reflection piece in terms of, having that ability to go there. And I had dropped it in the chat. It's that idea, right, where they say you put your oxygen mask on first. And that's for a reason. Like, how can I help you if I'm struggling, if I'm broken myself? Because my help to you will be interrupted if I have not first taken care of myself. Mm-hmm. And so that's the beautiful thing about me being able to show up and be present, and even being able to have that empathy. You said it earlier, Misha, and this now we brought out more ingredients to why that recipe is proven. You have to have some emotional intelligence to be able to even show some empathy and that true connection to where it's now going to be the A words of awareness and acknowledgement versus the E words of enmeshment and embellishment. So that takes some deep emotional work sometimes.
And
And time.
that phrase, I think when I first heard it, I heard it differently than what you just described, Mike. And I really appreciate there's a distinction, because when I first heard it, I thought you can't take your client deeper than you've gone yourself or something like that. And so I thought, oh, well, I have to do all this like really big, deep emotional work, and then I can expect to do it with my client. No, 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 no. That is not what that means. That means, yes, there is work that you need to do, but you can have expectations for your client to ever be willing to go anywhere. And so it's more, I feel like that is more about your personal growth as a person and as a coach, rather than to put any expectations on the client. I do understand that that part of, that phrase comes off as like, you can't expect your client to go deeper than you've gone. Well, in my opinion, you don't expect your client to go deep. You expect your client to go wherever they're comfortable with, but you do. Yes, you do have to do your inner work if you really want to be an impactful, empathetic, non-enmeshed coach.
Part of that discussion is the willingness for you to do that work yourself, is so that when your client is ready to do that work, you're not coming from an unknown place.
Yes. Yeah,
You're coming from, and that's where our learning, our instinct, our intuition, our learning helps in a coaching session. When we recognize they're willing to go there, those questions change. Those curiosity questions have a different flavor to them. They have a different spice to them than when we're in that topical space.
I think, yeah.
When they say that, that's what they're actually trying to say.
Yeah, and I know that I think it can be both, honestly. It depends on the person, the situation. There are coaches who come through our courses who've never had a coach. And so they're wondering, why aren't they getting clients? Well, how do you actually support coaching if you don't get a coach? Or all they've ever had, and I know anybody can disagree with me, I'm okay with that. How do you support coaches being paid if all you've ever done is reciprocal coaching? If you don't value the service that you are providing enough to actually have someone that you pay, that you value and honor for the work that they do, it can be very difficult to expect anyone to pay you for coaching. So there's that element. I'm not saying that it's always true. I've never been a therapist, and I don't know if my therapists have had therapists, but they've had some kind of healer in their life. And so as a coach, have you paid to have some kind of healer or coach in your life so that you can look at your own blocks, barriers, biases, boundaries? We all talk about this in the classes. Are you doing that work? Whether you go deep or you go wide, are you doing that work? Because if you are not doing that work, then it is more potentially possible for someone to see you as someone who talks the talk, but doesn't walk the walk. So that's kind of where I come from with that statement.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, Misha. I do. I think that's I don't want to say right.
No, it's part of everything. It's part of everything.
I think it's fairly accurate. It resonates as true for me.
Yes, the yes and versus the period, right? The yes period. It's the yes and.
Yes, and some exceptions.
Right. And the way I say it, Misha and Lisa, like in class, I'll say that statement, right? And I'll even say, a lot of times you may hear the theme or the thought of this. And I just pretty much bring it back to there's a process, right? There's a process of this. And trusting the process it's easier when you have some knowledge of how the process works.
Yeah.
And so now if I learn it and I just, if I just read up how to ride that bike and I've never fallen in the bushes with my trainer, and when the training
Right.
wheels come off, it doesn't land the same. And it's
No.
a lot longer before I get at least comfortable with the process in the uncomfortable moments. And so that's why I always put that, and that's why I responded like that. I put the yes and with that, and it's because it's so true. And I tell coaches all the time, invest in yourself, invest in the process and the skill so you can understand the thought I share. And this is really going back to something Misha shared earlier. I said, for me, my personal coaching belief is that all my clients arrive to me whole and complete without the need of being fixed, because I don't believe they're broken when they arrive to me. And if that be the case, then I got to investigate and be curious enough to, why are you in front of me in the first place?
Yes.
It ain't me. That's literally how I feel. And that
Which
takes
is
work
interesting,
to
Mike. Which is interesting because just a little bit ago you talked about something around you being broken. Not you per se, but you use that. I'm like, Mike, you're not broken. Nobody's broken. And you taught me that. You had that phrase. And we'll go back and watch the replay.
Did I use it for me being broken?
Yes.
I don't ever see myself as broken unless I'm talking about broken bones.
Well, yeah, you've had a few of those.
Yeah, so now I'm wondering, did I use that? Because that's a statement I don't even like. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I was quite surprised.
Sometimes we just don't know what we say.
I didn't hear it. Now I got to go back and
didn't
watch.
either.
I know.
I don't think I did either.
Yeah.
So
now I wonder, how did I?
Yeah, you did. Unless you all go back and listen after Jerome's edited. Are you going to edit this? You're going to try to make me look wrong, huh?
Parts of it. We've got the tape though. We can check it after we're done.
Run the tape.
So the title, Emotions 101, Empathy, Building Your Coaching Superpower. I know we only have 5 minutes left, but what would be a golden nugget that everyone wants to share around that, right? The title was Building Your Coaching Superpower, which we're saying is empathy. What's the takeaway? What's your final words?
Yeah, I'm going to go with, it's not only about empathy, it's what Mike called, now what did Mike call it? He called it soup? No, did you call it soup? All the ingredients made something. I don't remember what it was.
A recipe? Oh, wait.
A recipe, that's it.
Oh, the recipe that made the recipe good.
Ding, 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 ding. Okay, recipe. I like that. I think, empathy is absolutely a superpower, but it is part of the recipe of other bits and pieces that work in cohesion and at the same time.
Thank you.
I think I am walking away, and I appreciate you pointing it out, Misha, is maintenance for myself is a form of empathy. So that's something that I think I'm walking away with this conversation appreciating. I don't have any nuggets outside of that to really give anyone else, but I do appreciate that from you, Misha.
I'm sure that's going to be a nugget for other people too, though. And you got to exhibit it and share it, and with confidence. I mean, it was beautiful to hear you say, "I chose to preserve my peace." Like, that was strong. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to remind myself. I'm going to put preserve my peace on the wall. PEACE. I mean, I like cake too, but I don't need to preserve it because it will taste bad later. Who's next?
I want to go before Mike says mine. I'm like worried he's going to take it and then I'm going to have nothing.
Is that control and fear, or is that connection?
Yes, it is.
It is. Jen say I'm totally attached right now.
No empathy in this moment.
Oh my gosh. I realized that in the coaching seat, being curious is showing empathy. And I just finally made that connection when I think, Lisa, you were talking about the, how people, when you're listening to audio recordings, or maybe it was you, Misha, when you're listening to mentoring, I can't remember, but you were talking about how they want to say something, and just asking a question, being genuinely, deeply curious, that is empathy. And yeah, I don't know why. I just really, that fully like sunk in for me. So
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. For me, it's just honestly some of the things, of course, that we talk about so much in class, but that empathy is part of that cape that we wear, the superpower in coaching, right? And it takes a level of it. It reminded me to what you congratulate Jerome for that recognition that it's what you said earlier, Misha. That takes a boundary to protect your peace. That's some responsibility and boundaries there. So for me, empathy becomes that superpower when you realize that you can connect with someone without being fully involved or affected negatively by connecting with the individual in front of you. So it can be used not only for a coaching superpower, but just in our everyday lives. Having that empathy is just a beautiful and amazing thing to do as a human. So that's my kind of takeaway and final thoughts on empathy.
Yeah, and
and if you want to learn more about empathy,
Well,
no,
hold
Doing
on.
great, Jen. That was a great transition.
we
Misha,
gotta go.
ahead. Yeah.
We should go.
I want to go. So I want to say, and nobody knows I'm going to say this, and I'm just going to say it. So somebody might need to get a box of tissues. This is probably the best part-time job I've ever had, because our owner is one of the queens of empathy. Lisa models. I'm going to get emotional. I guess I'm the one that needs the tissues. If our students or anybody watching doesn't get this, Lisa has the utmost empathy and care and compassion and concern for all of us who work here, but also the students. And so, as hard as it can be sometimes when there's a complaint after complaint, because people complain, people blame, people shame. But Lisa, I have not seen you waver, except when you're not taking good care of yourself. I have not seen you waver in your ability to model empathy. And so my takeaway to share with everyone else is learn how to be empathetic for yourself so that you can be empathetic for others and continue to model it. Because Chavez said, one person talks to one person, who talks to one person, talks to one person. It's a ripple effect. And we will embody and support the world to embody empathy. But again, not as pity, but as a form of connection. And Lisa, you have the absolute knack of connecting with each and every one of us. It's amazing. So thank you.
Couldn't agree more, Misha. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's not her birthday, but that's why we there you go. All right.
And if you're watching this and you want to learn more, take our Coaching 101 class. And while you're at it, stay tuned for Coaching 102. You'll like that one even more.
And then mentoring.
And mentoring with our amazing mentor coach. And also, don't forget to continue to join us live on Wednesdays now. Every Wednesday,
at
3 p.m. Pacific. You know where to be.
Subscribe. Did we do it right?
Share from you.
Comment.
And thank you guys for joining.
Tell a friend.
And next week,
we'll
have Brooke and Anthony back.
Yes.
Okay.
Unless they have jet lag.